The Eurasian steppe during the Pleistocene was a landscape that seemed designed specifically for creatures like Elasmotherium. Vast open grasslands stretched for thousands of miles. To imagine a creature built like a living battering ram, roaming endless expanses of territory where speed, power, and intimidation ruled, it's almost unbelievable. And that was Elasmotherium. What makes their territorial dominance truly remarkable is that they weren't just surviving, but thriving in areas where other megafauna couldn't establish permanent populations. The frozen steppes of Siberia, the windswept plains of Kazakhstan, the harsh grasslands of Central Asia, these were Elasmotherium's hunting grounds, places where the combination of extreme cold, sparse vegetation, and brutal competition eliminated most other large herbivores. Their secret, as I understand it, lay in their approach to resource management. While mammoth herds required vast areas to support their numbers, moving constantly to find sufficient food, Elasmotherium operated on a different principle entirely. They were territorial specialists, claiming specific ranges and defending them with an aggressive efficiency that made migration unnecessary. That horn wasn't just a weapon. It was a property deed written in bone and enforced through violence. Think of the advantages this gave them during the harshest periods of the Ice Age. When food became scarce and competition intensified, mammoth herds had to keep moving, constantly searching for new feeding grounds while burning precious calories in the process. Elasmotherium simply cleared their territory of competitors and settled in for the long haul. They could access buried vegetation that other creatures couldn't reach, defend prime feeding areas that others couldn't claim, and maintain energy reserves that migration-dependent species couldn't match. The fossil record tells a story of creatures that weren't just surviving, they were prospering. Elasmotherium remains have been found across a range that stretched from Ukraine to Mongolia, a distribution that suggests not desperate wandering, but successful territorial expansion. These weren't refugees from climate change. They were the landlords of the Ice Age, collecting rent in the form of exclusive access to the best grazing areas. And unlike mammoth populations, which fluctuated dramatically with environmental changes, Elasmotherium populations remained relatively stable throughout their existence. This wasn't luck. It was the natural result of a survival strategy so effective that it made them nearly immune to the environmental press that devastated other megafauna. For a creature so perfectly adapted to Ice Age conditions, so dominant in its chosen environment, and so well equipped for survival, Elasmotherium's extinction presents one of paleontology's most perplexing mysteries. How do you eliminate something that appeared virtually indestructible? While mammoths managed to survive in various forms until roughly 4,000 years ago, with some populations persisting on isolated islands well into human civilization, Elasmotherium vanished from the fossil record around 39,000 years ago. This wasn't a gradual decline. It was a sudden, complete disappearance that left no descendants and precious few clues about what could have overwhelmed such a formidable creature. The conventional explanation points to climate change, but this theory has some serious problems. Elasmotherium had already survived multiple ice ages, numerous warming periods, and dramatic environmental shifts throughout its history. These were creatures that had proven themselves capable of adapting to changing conditions over millions of years. Why would this particular climate shift prove fatal when so many previous ones had been survived? Some researchers suggest human hunting prey, but again, the evidence doesn't quite add up. While humans were certainly present in Elasmotherium's range during the late Pleistocene, the idea that early human populations could have systematically eliminated creatures this large and dangerous seems optimistic at best. Remember, we're talking about 5-ton animals armed with 6-foot horns and the temperament of a cornered badger. Even with primitive weapons, the cost-benefit analysis of hunting such creatures seems questionable. The most disturbing possibility is that Elasmotherium's very dominance contributed to its downfall. Their territorial nature, while advantageous during stable periods, may have prevented them from adapting to rapidly changing conditions. Unlike mammoths, which could migrate to more favorable areas, Elasmotherium populations may have been too committed to their territories to abandon them when conditions deteriorated. But here's the truly unsettling part. The disappearance was so complete that for centuries, scientists weren't even Elasmotherium had existed at all. Unlike mammoth remains, which are found regularly and in excellent condition, Elasmotherium fossils are rare and often fragmentary. It's almost as if something deliberately erased them from the archaeological record. Recent discoveries have added new layers to this mystery. Some fossils show evidence of stress markers and nutritional deficiencies that suggest the final populations were struggling with environmental press. Others display unusual growth patterns that might indicate disease or genetic problems. The picture emerging is of a species that didn't just disappear, it collapsed suddenly and catastrophically. Taken together, the evidence paints a grim picture. Whatever eliminated Elasmotherium was powerful enough to bring down a creature that had reigned unchallenged for ages, resilient, dominant, and built to endure. And yet it vanished with barely a trace. For an animal that once defined the Ice Age landscape, the silence surrounding its extinction is genuinely haunting. The mammoth survival story, impressive as it is, suddenly seems less like triumph and more like luck. They weren't necessarily better adapted. Perhaps they were just more fortunate. Elasmotherium. It wasn't just another Ice Age animal. It was the pinnacle of prehistoric power. I find myself drawn to creatures so finely tuned to their environments, they redefine what dominance looks like. The mammoth may have gotten the fame, but Elasmotherium earned the title that mattered most, the real titan of the Ice Age. But Elasmotherium wasn't the only behemoth history forgot. While it ruled the frozen steppes, another titan far to the south was the definition of giant altogether, bigger than a mammoth, heavier than a T-Rex, and possibly the largest land mammal to ever walk the earth. When I envision the world that shaped our earliest ancestors, I typically imagine a landscape dominated by predators. Saber-toothed cats stalking the savanna, massive hyenas lurking near waterholes, and early humans huddled around fires for protection. But what if one of the most significant competitors our ancestors faced wasn't a carnivore at all, but another primate? One so massive it would tower over any human alive today. Meet Dimorphism inans, the terrible ape of Pleistocene Africa. Standing over 1.5 meters, or around 5 feet tall when upright, and weighing up to 150 kilograms, or 330 pounds, it was nearly 5 times heavier than today's largest baboons. These colossal primates shared the African landscape with Australopithecus, an early Homo species, between roughly 3 to 2 million years ago. Yet, despite their imposing presence during this pivotal chapter of prehistory, they remain virtually unknown outside of specialized scientific circles. Dinopithecus belonged to the family Cercopithecidae, the Old World monkeys, rather than the hominoid family. Specifically, it's classified within the subfamily Papionini, alongside modern baboons, geladas, and mangabes. Despite this taxonomic distance from humans, Dinopithecus represents one of the most remarkable examples of primate gigantism in the fossil record. The genus first entered scientific literature in 1938 when paleontologist Robert Broom described Dinopithecus inans based on fossil remains from Sterkfontein, near Pretoria, South Africa. The name itself tells a story. Dino, from the Greek for terrible or fearfully great. Pithecus, meaning ape or monkey, and inans, meaning huge in Latin. A fitting title for a creature that pushed the boundaries of what we thought primates could become. Subsequent discoveries have primarily come from cave sites in South Africa, including Kromdraai and Cooper's Cave, locations famously associated with early hominin remains. Fossil evidence includes partial skulls, mandibles, and post-cranial elements that allow paleontologists to reconstruct its appearance and lifestyle. Most fossils date between 3 and 2 million years ago, placing Dinopithecus firmly in the Pliocene epoch, alongside early Australopithecus and Homo species. Physically, Dinopithecus was a scaled-up baboon built for terrestrial power. Its skull alone meet up to 30 centimeters in males and featured an elongated muzzle, enlarged canines, and a prominent sagittal crest for anchoring massive jaw muscles, indicators of both feeding strength and male-male competition. The mandible was exceptionally robust, with a deep body adapted to handle powerful chewing forces far beyond what is seen in modern baboons. Dental analysis shows a heavy emphasis on grinding plant material. Large molars with thick enamel point to a diet that included fibrous vegetation, seeds, and tubers, foods that required prolonged mastication. These adaptations suggest Dinopithecus could exploit tough resources that smaller primates couldn't process efficiently, offering a survival edge in diverse or fluctuating environments. Still, for all that chewing power, it needed a body that could carry the weight, literally. Though fossilized post-cranial remains are fragmentary, they leave no doubt. This was a ground dweller built like a fortress. The bones are dense, the muscle attachments oversized, and the proportions suggest a primate that moved low and heavy. It wasn't agile, but it didn't need to be. It was stable, durable, a four-limbed tank that could traverse both woodland and savanna. Now, here's where the social structure gets fascinating. Sexual dimorphism in Dinopithecus was extreme, even more pronounced than in modern baboons. Males may have weighed up to twice as much as females and bore significantly larger canines and cranial crests. This suggests intense male competition, likely involving physical confrontations and dominance displays, a social structure where size directly translated to reproductive success. Yet all this leaves Dinopithecus somewhere in the middle of its ecosystem. Its size positioned it as a mesopredator, both hunter and hunted. It likely fed on fruits seeds, roots, and small animals, while remaining vulnerable to apex predators like saber-toothed cats or large hyenas. Its bulk, strength, and potential for aggressive defense would have made it a formidable opponent, one that early hominins may have respected, avoided, or even competed with. Modern baboons are notoriously territorial, confrontational, and quick to violence when threatened. And Dinopithecus almost certainly took that to the extreme. With large, dominant males leading the charge, a threatened troop could have erupted into an explosion of noise, displays, and physical retaliation. Raised hackles, deafening vocalizations, and jaw-clapping would have been the first warning. But if that didn't work, those massive canines weren't just for show. A provoked Dinopithecus, especially a protective male, could have delivered devastating bites and powerful strikes capable of injuring or killing mid-sized predators. Some paleontologists estimate Dinopithecus could have delivered bite forces comparable to those of big cats, perhaps reaching or even exceeding 2,000 pounds of crushing force. I sometimes imagine what it must have been like to face down a Dinopithecus, not just its lone strength, which was more than enough to crush bone or tear through muscle, but to face a defensive circle of 10 to 20 of them, all bristling with muscle and rage. It would have been a serious deterrent to even large carnivores, or for that matter, early hominins. This wasn't a creature that backed down easily. It didn't need to. During the Pliocene era, when Dinopithecus thrived, South Africa was undergoing significant climatic shifts. For a primate of its exceptional size, these changes brought both unique challenges and new opportunities. Forests were gradually giving way to more open woodlands and grasslands, a transition that favored adaptable ground-dwelling species. Fossil sites where Dinopithecus remains have been found suggest it inhabited a mosaic landscape of open savanna interspersed with woodlands and riverine forests, environments not unlike those preferred by modern baboons. Troop life in Dinopithecus likely mirrored that of modern baboons, but on a far more intimidating scale. These multi-male, multi-female groups were probably structured around rigid dominance hierarchies, with adult males asserting their rank through visual displays and, when necessary, brutal physical confrontations. With some males weighing up to 150 kilograms, these clashes were anything but subtle. Adult males likely positioned themselves on the outskirts of the troop, forming a living barrier against potential predators. At dawn, the group would descend from cliffs or tall trees, safe havens used to avoid nocturnal hunters. From there, the day began with movement and lots of eating. Feeding likely consumed much of the daylight hours. Adult males may have needed up to 7 kilos of plant matter daily. Grasses, seeds, fruits, bulbs, tubers, all requiring tremendous chewing power. And while plants formed the base of their diet, they weren't strictly herbivores. Like their modern relatives, Dinopithecus likely supplemented with animal protein, small vertebrates, insects, scavenged carcasses. But here's the twist. With their size and strength, they may have taken things further. Juvenile antelope, or the young of larger prey animals, weren't out of the question. And when it came to disputed carcasses, their bulk alone may have been enough to intimidate other predators into backing off. Much like modern papionins, Dinopithecus likely relied on a rich set of vocalizations, facial cues, body postures, and physical contact. With brains scaled to their size and complex social structures to manage, their interactions were probably just as nuanced, broadcasting everything from individual rank to predator warnings with a glance or a grunt. Perhaps the most compelling aspect of Dinopithecus is its temporal and geographic overlap with early human species. Between approximately 3 and 2 million years ago, as Dinopithecus roamed the South African landscape, the hominin presence was undergoing a period of remarkable change. Species like Australopithecus were being joined by early Homo. Upright walking had become well established, brain sizes were growing, and the first stone tools were appearing. This was the crucible of humanity, and Dinopithecus was there to witness it. The fossil evidence places Dinopithecus in association with hominin remains at several critical sites. At Swartkrans and Cooper's Cave in South Africa's Cradle of Humankind, Dinopithecus fossils have been found in the same deposits as Australopithecus robustus and early Homo specimens. This wasn't just proximity across a landscape. These primates inhabited the same immediate environments, drank from the same water sources, sheltered in the same cave systems, and likely observed each other regularly. The size disparity alone would have created a power imbalance. Early hominins stood approximately 1.2 to 1.5 meters tall and weighed between 30 to 55 kilograms. They would have been significantly outmatched by adult male Dinopithecus, which averaged around 80 kilograms, with larger individuals reaching up to 150 kilograms. Armed with formidable canines and superior upper body strength, even the smaller female Dinopithecus would have presented a physical threat. Competition for resources was inevitable. Both groups were omnivorous, with overlapping dietary preferences, though with different specializations. Early hominins were developing adaptations for a more versatile diet, including meat obtained through scavenging and possibly hunting, while Dinopithecus likely specialized in efficiently processing large quantities of plant materials. Nevertheless, both would have sought out the same high-value food resources, fruits, nuts, tubers, and water sources, creating potential conflict points. And it wasn't just diet that brought them into contact. Both groups favored mosaic environments, offering a mix of woodlands for shelter and open areas for foraging. Both likely needed trees or cliff faces for nighttime safety from predators. Both would have been drawn to reliable water sources, particularly during dry seasons. This shared preference for similar habitats would have end regular encounters between the species. The responses of early hominins to Dinopithecus were likely complex and situational. Direct competition was probably avoided when possible, with hominins developing greater behavioral flexibility to compensate for their physical disadvantage. This might have included adjusting activity patterns to avoid peak Dinopithecus feeding times, developing more efficient foraging strategies, or utilizing tools to access food resources unavailable to even the powerful Dinopithecus. One intriguing possibility is that the presence of Dinopithecus may have accelerated hominin tool use and cooperation. When confronted with larger, more physically imposing competitors, our ancestors, the disappearance of Dinopithecus always struck me as a particularly poignant example of how even the mightiest creatures can fall. Imagine these mega-monkeys cracking nuts with stone tools, digging for tubers, coordinating defenses against predators. They were survivors. Yet, Around 1.8 to 1.6 million years ago, they vanished. I think about the press they faced, not just climate change, shrinking their woodlands and food supply, but also competition from more adaptable baboons. And then the rise of Homo erectus. More advanced tools, broader diets, overlapping ecological needs. It must have been a relentless struggle for resources. It's a reminder that even the most successful adaptations can become liabilities in a changing world. Then there were the predators. Dinopithecus and early hominins shared those threats. Big cats, hyenas, crocodiles. It's fascinating to think about how the presence of a Dinopithecus troop might have inadvertently protected nearby hominins. Predators might have been less likely to attack a group of humans if faced with multiple large aggressive male Dinopithecus. Of course, it could have worked the other way around too. But beyond Dinopithecus, there were other apex predators. In ancient Greece, they spoke of the terrible wolf, a creature so dominant that even the largest prehistoric animals feared it, the dire wolf. These wolves, apex predators of their time, were known for their meat-heavy diet and impressive hunting skills. Their teeth were different from other wolves, their digestive system shorter, optimized for meat. Their skeleton spoke of immense strength. They were apex predators for a reason, with a bite force that allowed them to take down formidable prey. They roamed diverse landscapes, from North America to South America, even into Eastern Asia. In North America, they hunted bison, Pleistocene horses, giant ground sloths. South America offered large ground sloths, glyptodons, mastodons. In Asia, they faced woolly mammoths and rhinoceroses. They competed with other predators, saber-toothed cats, American lions, giant short-faced bears. And at the La Brea tar pits, their dominance was clear, outnumbering gray wolves 5 to 1. They lived in monogamous pairs, hunted in packs, and displayed a fierce determination. But where did they come from? The origin of the dire wolf has always been a debate among scientists. One theory suggests they evolved from a Eurasian canine lineage. Another posits an ancestral lineage native to the Americas. For years, scientists tried to extract DNA from dire wolf fossils. In 1992, they attempted to analyze mitochondrial DNA, but tar residue from the La Brea pits thwarted their efforts. It wasn't until 2021 that they finally obtained nuclear DNA from 5 dire wolf fossils. And what they discovered was remarkable. Dire wolves represent a unique genetic lineage that split from wolf-like canines about 5.7 million years ago. This supports the idea of an ancestral lineage native to the Americas, distinct from the genus Canis. So despite skeletal similarities, dire wolves and gray wolves are not closely related, an example of convergent evolution, where different species independently develop similar traits. The dire wolf stands alone, a unique species in the canine world. The story of the dire wolf spans an impressive 40 million years. It began with the arrival of the canid family in North America. From fox-like vulpini to dog-like canini, I find the diverse branches of their family tree so intriguing, each showcasing unique variations. Dire wolf fossils have been discovered in diverse habitats across North and South America. Plains, grasslands, forested mountain areas, even arid savannas. They seem to thrive almost everywhere. The most fossil-abundant areas are the La Brea tar pits in Los Angeles and the Tule Springs in Nevada. While dire wolf remains are less common at high latitudes in North America, recent discoveries of Asian dire wolf fossils challenge previous theories about the limits of their range. Fossils have been reported in various states in the United States, with major sites located east of the Rocky Mountains. Dire wolf fossils have also been uncovered in various locations across Mexico, particularly in the San Josecito Cave and El Cedazo. And they've even been found in South America, with specimens dated to less than 17,000 years ago in countries including Venezuela, Peru, Bolivia, Chile, and Ecuador. The discovery of a dire wolf fossil in northeastern China in 2020 suggests a migration route from mid-latitude North America across Beringia into Eurasia. It really challenges previous assumptions about the barriers to their dispersal. Understanding the physical characteristics of dire wolves really sheds light on their remarkable adaptations and behaviors. They were similar in proportion to modern North American wolves, like the Yukon wolf and northwestern wolf, but they exhibited variations in size and morphology. Some dire wolf specimens from Rancho La Brea were smaller than the largest northern wolves today, while others were larger. The dire wolf had smaller feet and a larger head compared to modern wolves of similar body size, with a massive skull characterized by broader dimensions and a higher sagittal crest. Geographic differences existed, with specimens from California and Mexico showing distinct craniodental features and limb proportions compared to those from east of the Continental Divide. One type had shorter and lighter limbs, making it less adapted for running than timber wolves and coyotes, while another possessed longer limbs comparable to the Yukon wolf. 125,000 years ago, dire wolves roamed the earth when the sea level was 8 meters higher than today, during the Sangamonian interglacial period. The Wisconsin glacial period followed, lasting from 80,000 to 20,000 years ago, also known as the Ice Age, with glaciers covering much of North America. Dire wolves went extinct 9,500 years ago, marking the end of a unique era. Research indicates that dire wolves evolved separately from modern North American gray wolves and coyotes, without genetic mixing. The reasons for their extinction remain debated, likely involving factors such as climate change, competition with other predators, and changes in prey availability. Their disappearance marked the end of a unique lineage within the Canidae family, potentially altering predator-prey dynamics at the time. Between 100 to 25,000 years ago and 9,500 years ago, significant climatic shifts occurred, shaping the environment in which dire wolves lived. These changes, alongside fluctuations in prey populations, likely influenced their survival. They existed in diverse habitats ranging from grasslands to forests, adapting to various environmental conditions. As apex predators, they played a crucial role in regulating ecosystems, impacting the populations of herbivores and smaller predators. Their extinction represented a loss of biodiversity and disrupted ecological balances established over millennia. While interbreeding is known among wolf-like canines, studies have found no evidence of genetic mixing between dire wolves and extant North American gray wolves or coyotes, suggesting independent evolution. The exact reasons for their extinction remain a subject of debate, with factors such as climate change, competition with other predators, and changes in prey availability likely playing a role. Reflecting on the era of the dire wolf, Its formidable presence and powerful bite force captivates our imagination. In the grand tapestry of Earth's history, few chapters are as captivating as the rise and fall of the dinosaurs. These magnificent creatures dominated our planet for over 160 million years, shaping ecosystems and adapting into a myriad of forms that continue to captivate our imagination. But as the curtain fell on the age of reptiles, it gave way to an unexpected sequel, one where the supporting characters stepped into the spotlight and nearly stole the show. Enter the forest wrasses, more commonly known as the terror birds. These feathered nightmares emerged from the ashes of the dinosaur extinction, carrying the torch of their terrifying predecessors and proving that nature abhors a vacuum, especially when it comes to apex predators. Roughly 53 million years ago, in the early Eocene, the world was a very different place. A hothouse Earth with lush forests stretching from pole to pole, filled with a diverse range of life forms that emerged after the extinction of the dinosaurs. It was in this steamy prehistoric paradise that the first terror bird, Paleopsilopterus, made its debut. Standing at a modest height of 1 meter or 3 feet, this Brazilian bird might not have seemed particularly terrifying at first glance. In fact, it was about the same size as a modern-day stork. Hardly the stuff of nightmares. But appearances can be deceiving, and Paleopsilopterus had something its contemporaries lacked: potential. What set Paleopsilopterus apart was its agility and speed, traits that would become hallmarks of its descendants. While it may not have been the apex predator of its time, dwarfed by monstrous crocodilians and giant snakes, it was a harbinger of things to come. Little did the other inhabitants of ancient South America know. Imagine the surprise of early European mammals when a South American terror bird appeared in their midst. That's exactly what happened when Eleutherornis, a terror bird 50% taller than its ancestor, spread its wings across the sea. Its fossil remains have been found in France and Switzerland, making it the only known member of its family to have lived outside the New World. I often wonder what it must have been like to witness this exotic predator bringing a taste of South American terror to the Old World. But Eleutherornis was just the beginning. As the epochs rolled by, the terror birds continued to grow, adapt, and diversify. It's as if they were in a relentless competition, each new species trying to outdo its predecessors in size and ferocity. The Oligocene epoch, from about 34 to 23 million years ago, marked a turning point. It was during this time that the family truly began to live up to its name with the emergence of giants. Paraphysornis, a Brazilian bird, was an absolute behemoth. It stood 1.4 meters, or 4.5 feet, tall and tipped the scales at a whopping 180 kilograms, or 400 pounds. To put that into perspective, Paraphysornis outweighed the largest living bird today, the ostrich. This was no lightweight contender. Paraphysornis was built like a feathered tank with robust bones that spoke of raw power. Paleontologists believe that it hunted using a combination of kicks, slashes, and powerful jabs with its sharp beak. A prehistoric version of mixed martial arts, perhaps? Paraphysornis wasn't just a mindless brute. Like many of its terror bird kin, it likely possessed a level of intelligence that set it apart from other contemporary predators. Studies of terror bird brain cases suggest that they had well-developed visual and auditory centers, indicating keen senses that would have made them formidable hunters. As impressive as Paraphosaurus was, it was merely setting the stage for what was to come. As we step into the Miocene and Pliocene epochs, spanning from about 23 to 2.5 million years ago, we encounter the true giants of the terror bird family. These were creatures that pushed the boundaries of what it meant to be a bird, reaching sizes that rivaled the predatory dinosaurs of old. Three names stand out in this pantheon of avian terrors: Titanus, Kelenken, and Brontornis. Each of these genera represents the pinnacle of the terror bird lineage, and each had its own claim to fame. Titanus, the youngest and smallest of the trio, was also the most adventurous. While most terror birds were content to dominate South America, Titanus had grander ambitions. It crossed the newly formed land bridge connecting North and South America during the Great American Interchange, becoming the only large South American predator to successfully establish itself in North America. Unlike most of its relatives, this bird lived in what is now the United States, including the states of Texas, Florida, and California. Standing 2 meters, or 6.6 feet tall, Titanus would have been an imposing sight for the mammals of North America. Imagine the shock of a Pleistocene horse or ground sloth accustomed to watching out for saber-toothed cats and dire wolves, suddenly confronted by this alien predator, half bird, half nightmare. But as impressive as Titanus was, it was dwarfed by its cousins back in South America. Kelenken, named after a mythological Tehuelche spirit, stood a towering 3 meters or 9.8 feet, tall and weighed around 250 kilograms or 550 pounds. This was a bird the size of a grizzly bear, with a head larger than that of a horse and a beak that could crush bone. Speaking of its head, recent studies have shown that Kelenken and other large terror birds possessed a unique skull structure that set them apart from their smaller relatives. Known as the terror bird skull type, this adaptation gave them increased bite force and pecking power. This suggests that these giants may have been capable of taking down larger prey than previously thought, potentially including some of the megafauna that roamed South America during their reign. The title of the largest terror bird is still hotly debated, with Brontornis giving Kelenken a run for its money. While slightly shorter at 2.8 meters or 9.2 feet, Brontornis was built like a feathered bulldozer, potentially weighing up to 400 kilograms or 880 pounds. This made it not just the heaviest terror bird, but also the heaviest carnivorous bird of all time, and the fourth heaviest bird overall. Interestingly, Brontornis has been the subject of scientific controversy. Some paleontologists have questioned whether it was truly a terror bird or even a carnivore at all, citing similarities in its toe claws to those of herbivorous birds. However, recent studies have identified features in Brontornis's vertebrae that are unique to terror birds, lending weight to its classification as a member of this fearsome family. Whether Brontornis was a terror bird or not, its massive size would have made it a force to be reckoned with. Its weight likely made it slower than its more nimble cousins, but what it lacked in speed, it made up for in raw power. One can imagine Brontornis as the tank of the terror bird family. Terror birds. They were built to dominate. Some of them, like Kelenken and Brontornis, were giants, relying on sheer size and power, but others? they took a different path. Speed, I've learned, was just as crucial as size in the terror bird's success. Studies of their leg bones reveal a structure remarkably similar to modern ostriches. Short thigh bones paired with elongated lower leg and foot bones. It's a clear sign of high-speed running ability. Paleontologists estimate that many terror birds, including some of the largest species like Titanus, could have reached speeds exceeding 30 mph, or 48 km/h. Faster than Usain Bolt, but twice as tall and many times the weight. But speed wasn't just about chasing prey. For many, especially the smaller and medium-sized species, it was a crucial defense. In a world filled with other large predators, including giant carnivorous mammals and enormous crocodilians, a quick getaway could mean the difference between life and death. This combination of speed and size made terror birds versatile predators, able to adapt to various hunting strategies. Smaller, faster species might have specialized in chasing down swift prey like small mammals and reptiles, while the larger, more powerful species could have employed ambush tactics or even taken on larger, more dangerous quarry. Their imposing size and fearsome beaks often steal the spotlight, but the true power of terror birds lay in their highly developed senses. Recent studies of their skulls and brain cases have revealed sensory capabilities that put them leagues ahead of many of their contemporaries. While terror birds might not have had eyesight quite as sharp as modern raptors, they were far from visually impaired. Their eyes were well developed and positioned to provide excellent depth perception, a crucial advantage for any predator. What really set their vision apart was its versatility. These birds were equally adept at seeing in bright daylight and in the dim light of dawn and dusk, making them effective hunters around the clock. The inner ear structure of terror birds suggests an acute sensitivity to low-frequency sounds. This ability would have allowed them to detect the footsteps and movements of potential prey, even when hidden by dense vegetation. I imagined a terror bird standing motionless in the prehistoric forests of South America, its head cocked slightly to one side. To a casual observer, it might appear to be resting, even dozing, but in reality, every fiber of its being is alert, its incredibly sensitive ears picking up the faintest rustle of leaves or the softest patter of tiny feet. In an instant, it can pinpoint the location of its unsuspecting prey and launch into action. This combination of visual and auditory prowess made terror birds the complete predatory package. It's no wonder these birds were able to dominate their ecosystems for millions of years. But even the mightiest rulers faced their downfall, and the reign of the terror birds was no exception. For millions of years, these avian predators had ruled supreme in South America, developing into a diverse array of species that filled various ecological niches. But somewhere along the line, their luck ran out. Traditionally, the extinction of the terror birds was linked to the Great American Interchange, a major paleobiogeographic event that occurred about 2.7 million years ago. This event saw the formation of the Isthmus of Panama, creating a land bridge between North and South America. As a result, animals from both continents were able to migrate across this newly formed connection, leading to a significant reshuffling of fauna. The conventional wisdom held that the influx of new predators from North America, including cats, dogs, and bears, outcompeted the terror birds, leading to their eventual extinction. It was a neat and tidy explanation that seemed to make perfect sense. However, as is often the case in science, the truth has turned out to be more complex and nuanced. Recent studies have cast doubt on this simple competition-based extinction model, revealing a more intricate tapestry of factors that led to the terror bird's downfall. One of the primary challenges to the competition hypothesis comes from a closer examination of the fossil record. It turns out that most terror birds, along with many of their main South American competitors, had already disappeared long before placental predators arrived in South America in significant numbers. This timing mismatch suggests that something else was at play. Moreover, the success of Titanus in North America serves as a counterpoint to the idea that terror birds couldn't compete with placental mammals. Not only did Titanus successfully expand its range northward during the interchange, but it also managed to coexist with large canids and felines for millions of years. Clearly, at least some terror birds were more than capable of holding their own against mammalian predators. So, if competition alone didn't doom the terror birds, what did? The answer, as is often the case in paleontology, likely involves a complex interplay of factors. Climate change, in particular, may have played a significant role. From the Oligocene to the Pliocene, Earth's climate was on a long-term cooling trend, culminating in a series of ice ages. This global cooling would have had a profound impact on the ecosystems that terror birds called home. As temperatures dropped and habitats changed, the lush forests that many terror bird species relied on would have given way to more open grasslands. I find myself captivated by the thought that terror birds, these feathered giants, may have survived almost to the cusp of human arrival in South America. Imagine our ancestors encountering such creatures. What stories would have been told? What legends might have sprung up around them? It's unlikely there were direct interactions, but the possibility that stories of these birds were passed down through generations isn't far-fetched. After all, other megafauna, like woolly mammoths and giant ground sloths, left lasting impressions on human culture. The near miss between humans and terror birds is a poignant reminder of the incredible diversity of life that has existed on our planet. It's sobering to think that if they had managed to hang on for just a few thousand years longer, our understanding of the natural world might be very different today. The terror birds, despite their resilience, faced immense challenges. As South America underwent significant environmental changes, with forests giving way to more open grasslands, some species struggled. The larger, more specialized ones in particular may have found it difficult to find enough prey to sustain their massive bodies. The influx of new competitors from North America, while perhaps not the primary cause of their extinction, would have added additional press. For years, we believed terror birds had gone extinct around 1 million years ago, but new fossil evidence has dramatically altered this timeline. Some smaller species have now been dated to as recently as 96,000 years ago. Even more tantalizing is the discovery of fossils attributed to an unidentified species in a formation dated to just 18,000 years ago. Now, when we think about imposing predators, it's hard not to think about the Tyrannosaurus rex. In the thick forests of the past, The T-Rex was the top predator, striking terror into any animal that encountered it. With its seismic movements and razor-sharp teeth, this dinosaur has always been regarded as the pinnacle of prehistoric might. Even today, its reputation endures as the most frightening being to have ever walked the planet. So, just how terrifying was the T-Rex actually? The first known fragment of a T-Rex skeleton was discovered in 1902 in Montana by paleontologist Barnum Brown. Since then, major finds, particularly the virtually complete specimen Sioux discovered in South Dakota, have offered invaluable information. Researchers have pieced together the history of this giant predator and its role as a prominent apex predator all over the late Cretaceous period through thorough excavation, evaluation, and reconstruction. T-Rex and other large theropod dinosaurs like Tarbosaurus and Daspeltosaurus are classified as members of the subfamily Tyrannosaurini within the family Tyrannosauridae. One of the last and most widely recognized tyrannosaurid species, Tyrannosaurus rex, represents the top predators of the late Cretaceous era and is a key figure in the evolution of dinosaurs. Stretching to an insane length, T-Rex boasted a muscular body that could extend up to 12 meters. That's a distance rivaling the size of a typical school bus. There's even paleontological speculation that certain specimens exceeded 13 meters, dwarfing any contemporary terrestrial predator. This imposing giant rose to a height of 6 meters at the hips. Imagine this enormously tall creature with two powerful legs bearing the weight of its massive frame, its head lifted high as it surveyed its realm with a regal authority. Estimates suggest that a T-Rex could weigh anywhere from 12 to 18 tons, with its skin and flesh covering its massive bones. That's similar to the weight of several small cars compressed into the form of one awe-inspiring predator. A true testament to the sheer power and bulk of this ancient apex predator. The Tyrannosaurus rex boasted a sturdy skeletal structure with a distinct vertebral column comprised of neck, back, and sacral vertebrae. Though the exact number of tail vertebrae varied, its neck formed a muscular S-shaped curve supporting its massive head, while pneumatic depressions and robust neural spines provided strength and flexibility. The forelimbs were short with two clawed fingers, contrasting the long hind limbs, contributing to its imposing stature. The pelvis featured a lengthy ilium and a large pubic boot, while the hind foot had an arctometatarsalien metatarsus. Throughout its skeleton, many bones were hollowed, reducing weight without sacrificing strength, which is crucial for supporting its bulk. The Tyrannosaurus rex, renowned for its massive size and impressive strength, possessed skulls reaching up to 1.54 meters in length. That's about the size of an adult human. I've always been fascinated by the Tyrannosaurus rex, but lately I find myself returning to its skull. Those skulls featured large fenestrae, which I've learned reduced weight. What's more, they showcased unique adaptations, like an extremely wide rear and a narrow snout, which I imagine gave them exceptional binocular vision. I can only marvel at these massive yet fused bones with their pneumatized components. These skulls contributed to the tyrannosaurid trend of a powerful bite, far surpassing that of non-tyrannosaurids. The upper jaw's U-shaped tip, I understand, allowed for the extraction of more tissue and bone with each bite. though this likely heightened stress on the front teeth. The teeth themselves. The teeth in the upper jaw of Tyrannosaurus rex exhibited prominent ridges and tips that curled backward like cutting tools. Such distinct heterodonty. The remaining teeth, robust and spaced, resembled lethal bananas. In mature individuals, I've read that the upper jaw housed larger teeth than the lower jaw, and the largest tooth discovered mead a staggering 30.5 cm in length. Numerous small openings were observed in both the upper and lower jaws, suggesting potential sensory functions, or perhaps indications of external structures. Despite Tyrannosaurus rex's reputation for its massive jaws and teeth, I can't overlook its disproportionately small arms. For a long time, I thought they were useless, but I've been reading some speculation indicates its small arms were not useless remains, but deadly weapons used in hand-to-hand combat. Paleontologist Stephen Stanley proposes that they were used as lethal weapons. With a length of just 3 feet, they had crescent-shaped claws that were sharpened to a razor edge, capable of causing deadly injuries to unsuspecting prey. I try to picture the moment when the T-Rex advances towards its target with its huge head hanging above, while its strong front limbs make rapid slashing movements, cutting through tissue and muscles with frightening accuracy. This information provides a better understanding of how the T-Rex hunted, showing its skill in quickly and effectively immobilizing its prey. Once thought to be useless structures, the T-Rex's arms are now recognized as crucial weapons in its hunting tactics. I'm reminded of the portrayal of Tyrannosaurus rex in Jurassic Park movies, emphasizing its poor eyesight. I always wondered about that. Characters often evade its notice by remaining still. However, recent scientific findings suggest otherwise. Paleontologists, drawing upon comparative anatomy and fossil evidence, theorize that the T-Rex likely had vision like contemporary predators like hawks, with the ability to detect both moving and stationary objects. This challenges its cinematic depiction and deepens our understanding of its sensory capabilities. Another perspective suggests the T-Rex was an adept ambush predator, utilizing its size, powerful jaws, and heightened senses to swiftly hunt prey. Conversely, some view it as a scavenger, feeding on carrion or scavenging from carcasses. These differing views underscore the complexity of the T-Rex's behavior and ecological role, fueling ongoing debates among researchers. Along with its extraordinary eyesight, the Tyrannosaurus rex possessed a remarkable sense of smell, akin to vultures today. This keen olfactory ability allowed it to spot objects up to 6 kilometers away under ideal conditions. In addition to its sharp senses, the T-Rex excelled at hunting due to its quick speed. Able to detect prey from a distance, it could pursue its targets at speeds reaching 25 mph, a pace comparable to the world record sprinting speed of Usain Bolt. The feeding and diet of the Tyrannosaurus rex were integral to its dominance as a top predator during the late Cretaceous period. With its massive size and powerful jaws filled with serrated teeth, T-Rex was a formidable carnivore. Its diet primarily consisted of large herbivorous dinosaurs such as Triceratops and Ankylosaurus, which were among the toughest dinosaurs of their time. Additionally, at times, T-Rex would also prey upon other large carnivorous dinosaurs, showcasing its fearsome predatory prowess. For example, it's believed that T-Rex may have occasionally targeted individuals of its own kind or even formidable predators, demonstrating the sheer dominance and terror of this apex predator. The Tyrannosaurus rex had a significant impact on its surroundings beyond its role as an efficient hunter. Its presence necessitated changes in the behavior of other animals. Some dinosaurs developed defenses such as speed or armor to evade its attacks, while others sought refuge in dense forests or migrated to new areas. As the dominant predator, T-Rex reshaped prey distribution and population dynamics, influencing ecological balance and predator-prey relationships. The Tyrannosaurus rex shared its environment with a diverse array of other dinosaurs, each possessing unique adaptations and behaviors. Among these were Edmontosaurus, Triceratops, Stegosaurus, Torosaurus, Albertosaurus, Pachycephalosaurus, Dinosaurus, Ornithomimus, and Anzu. Forget horned helmets and storm-tossed seas. The Vikings faced something far more terrifying, creatures so colossal and powerful they seemed ripped from legend. These weren't just animals. They were giants of a dying world, beasts that could crush ships and skewer warriors in an instant. Armed with iron blades and wooden shields, the Vikings didn't just conquer lands. They battled nature itself in clashes so intense they became legends whispered for centuries. The scale of it all, it's almost unbelievable. The first beast our Norse ancestors regularly encountered was the magnificent aurochs, wild cattle, unlike anything alive today. Standing at a towering 1.8 meters or 6 feet at the shoulder, these weren't your typical farm animals. A full-grown aurochs bull could weigh up to 1,000 kilograms, or 2,200 pounds, with a muscular frame that dwarfed even the largest modern cattle breeds. What made aurochs truly intimidating were their enormous horns, curved weapons that could span up to 1 meter or 3.3 feet, from tip to tip. These weren't defensive tools. They were perfectly designed killing instruments. The forward-facing orientation allowed bulls to charge directly at threats with enough force to impale a fully armored warrior or even flip a small boat. Archaeological evidence suggests that aurochs' horns were often kept as trophies after successful hunts, becoming drinking vessels for the most prestigious Viking warriors. The relationship between Vikings and aurochs was more than just survival. It was woven into their very culture, leaving a mark on Norse art, symbolism, and even the warrior mindset. Hunting these beasts was a true test of courage for young Norse warriors. Unlike modern hunting, where distance and firearms provide safety, Viking hunters had to approach within spear-throwing range, close enough to smell the animal's breath. A charging aurochs could reach speeds of 35 kilometers or 22 miles per hour, leaving hunters with mere seconds to make their throw or face the consequences. Many Norse graves contain evidence of horn wounds, silent testimony to hunts gone wrong. By the Viking Age, aurochs populations were already declining across Europe due to habitat loss and hunting prey. The last known aurochs died in 1627 in Poland's Jaktora forest, long after the Viking era had ended. But the land wasn't the only domain where Vikings encountered magnificent creatures that have since vanished. The seas that formed their highways held their own vanished giants. If you sailed with Vikings across the northern Atlantic, you would have witnessed an extraordinary sight along rocky coastlines, colonies of thousands of black and white birds standing upright like tiny sentinels. The great auk, often called the original penguin, bore a striking resemblance to its southern hemisphere counterparts, despite having no direct relation. Standing about 75 to 85 centimeters, or 2.5 to 2.8 feet tall, these flightless birds were perfectly adapted to the cold waters of the North Atlantic. Their wings had transformed into powerful flippers that propelled them through the ocean with remarkable speed. Measurements based on similar birds suggest they could fly underwater at up to 35 kilometers, or 22 miles per hour. On land, however, they were awkwardly vulnerable, waddling upright on two legs, unable to take flight when danger approached. For Vikings, the great auk represented an almost absurdly convenient resource. Unlike most prey that required chasing, these birds couldn't flee effectively on land, nor seafarers could simply walk among nesting colonies and select their victims. Archaeological evidence from Viking settlements in Iceland, Greenland, and the Faroe Islands reveals vast quantities of great auk bones in kitchen middens, often showing cut marks consistent with meat removal. The great auk's waterproof feathers were prized for insulation and bedding. Its fat provided lamp oil, and its beaks became decorative items. A Viking burial in Norway even featured a necklace with 5 great auk beaks, hinting at both symbolic and practical value. Ironically, the bird's marine adaptations made it vulnerable, breeding only on a few remote islands, laying a single egg on rocky ground. By the Viking Age, human hunting had already forced some colonies to vanish. The great auk's final extinction didn't occur until 1844, when the last confirmed pair was killed on the island of Elde off Iceland. A sad epilogue to a relationship that began when the first Norse ships reached their breeding grounds. The birds that had once numbered in the millions, forming colonies so vast they darkened shorelines, vanished because they had no natural defense against human predation. While Vikings ventured across vast oceans, the forests that surrounded their settlements held creatures just as remarkable and far more dangerous. Among these was a distinct forest giant that many researchers now believe represented a specialized hybrid population, the European forest elk, or skogselg. A creature that combined characteristics of what we now classify as separate moose and elk species. Standing up to 2.1 meters, or 7 feet, at the shoulder, with magnificent palmate antlers spanning up to 1.8 meters, or 6 feet across, these forest giants were truly imposing. Archaeological evidence from Viking settlements reveals distinctive antler configurations unlike modern European moose populations, suggesting these animals represented a unique genetic lineage that has since disappeared through hunting prey and hybridization with other cervid populations. What made these forest elk particularly remarkable was their coloration and behavior. Unlike modern moose with their uniformly dark coats, the Vikings encountered some truly massive creatures. Imagine an elk, but not like any elk we know today. Cave paintings suggest these animals had light patches on their sides and shoulders, almost like a dappled pattern. It provided excellent camouflage in the forests. These forest elk were vital to Viking communities. A single animal could yield over 500 kilos of meat, enough to feed a small village for weeks during those brutal northern winters. Their hides were tougher than cattle leather, perfect for shields, boats, and warm clothing. And those enormous antlers? Viking craftsmen turned them into everything from tools and weapons to drinking horns for their leaders. But even by the late Viking Age, these forest elk were already in decline. The combination of hunting and forest clearing fragmented their habitat, encounters became rare, and these magnificent beasts became creatures of the remote wilderness. But these weren't the only creatures shaping Viking survival. Deep within Scandinavia's icy rivers swam another powerhouse, just as valuable and equally dangerous, the gray whale. Today, spotting a whale feels wondrous, but for Viking sailors, these encounters were high-stakes battles. Gray whales were a valuable prize, offering meat, oil, and bone. But hunting them meant getting dangerously close, where one thrash of the whale's tail could shatter a longship. Unlike most whale species in northern seas today, the Atlantic gray whale was driven to extinction by the 18th century. During the Viking Age, however, these marine mammals were abundant, especially in coastal waters. Atlantic gray whales reached lengths of 14 to 15 meters, roughly the size of a Viking longship, a comparison that wouldn't have been lost on Norse seafarers. Their mottled gray coloration, often covered with barnacles, gave them a distinctive appearance. Gray whales were unique because of their feeding strategy. They plowed the seafloor for small invertebrates, creating massive mud plumes visible from the surface. This brought them into shallow coastal waters, precisely where Viking ships operated. A single whale could yield up to 20 tons of meat and blubber, enough to feed an entire settlement through the winter. Archaeological evidence shows specialized bone tools designed for processing whale meat, alongside huge cooking pits. But hunting gray whales wasn't without peril. Unlike passive species, gray whales were known for their aggressive defense. They would charge attacking boats, smashing vessels with their massive flukes. Norse sagas tell of whaling expeditions ending in disaster when whales fought back, earning them the nickname devilfish among later whalers. Atlantic gray whales were vulnerable because of their predictable migration patterns and coastal breeding grounds. Vikings, with their knowledge of coastal geography, could anticipate these movements and set up ambush points. By the late Viking Age, gray whale populations were already showing signs of depletion. The combination of increased whaling efficiency and the species' low reproductive rate set the stage for their disappearance from Atlantic waters. But the Viking struggles didn't end at sea. The forests of Britain held predators just as fierce and far less predictable. When Viking longships first landed on the shores of Britain and Ireland, they entered territories where another formidable predator had long reigned supreme: the British wolf. These wolves, genetically distinct from their Scandinavian cousins, had dominated the British Isles for thousands of years, before Norse settlers arrived. They stood taller than the Honshu wolf of Japan, but smaller than modern timber wolves, typically reaching heights of 70 to 85 centimeters at the shoulder. Their thick, often gray-brown coats were adapted to the damp conditions of the British Isles, with distinctive white markings frequently appearing on their chests, a feature noted in several Viking-era Daons. When Vikings first raided Lindisfarne in 793 CE, wolves remained common throughout Britain and Ireland. I find myself thinking about the last wolf killed in Ireland in 1786. It ended a lineage that had seen so much: the first Celtic settlers, the Viking invasions, and everything in between. What stories that animal could have told? Archaeological digs from early Viking settlements in the Hebrides and Northern Isles have turned up wolf bones with cut marks, which tells us the newcomers quickly started hunting them. For Vikings setting up permanent colonies in the British Isles, wolves were both a threat and an opportunity. They attacked livestock, especially sheep, which were key to the Norse economy in places like the Orkneys and Hebrides, making them enemies of the settlers. But Viking warriors also respected the wolf's hunting skills and pack coordination, qualities they valued in battle. This complex relationship shows up in Norse place names still found across former Viking areas in Britain. Places like Ulvadale or Wolf Valley in Cumbria and Wolf Hill in Perthshire mark areas where Norse settlers often ran into these predators. Viking-era runestones found in northern England show wolf hunts, hinting that these dangerous hunts had ceremonial meaning for warriors proving themselves in new lands. British wolves also made their way into Viking folklore. As Norse settlers mixed with local people, they took Celtic wolf myths and changed them into their own stories. The wolf-warrior connection became stronger, with berserkers sometimes said to wear wolf pelts instead of bear skins. But the end for British wolves wasn't brought by the Vikings, but by their descendants. As Norse settlements grew into medieval kingdoms, they started systematically killing off wolves. It started in the Viking Age but sped up later. The last wolves in England were gone by the 15th century, and Scotland's hung on until the 17th century. Then there were the Atlantic sturgeons, armored giants that lurked in the rivers and coastal waters of northern Europe. These living fossils, almost unchanged for over 200 million years, used to be all over the waterways of Viking lands. But now they're gone from much of where they used to live. The Baltic sturgeon was huge, with females growing up to 10 feet long and weighing over 660 pounds. Their prehistoric look, with bony plates called scutes in 5 rows along their bodies instead of scales, made them stand out. They had a long armored snout with a vacuum-like mouth underneath, perfect for sucking up mollusks and crustaceans from the river and sea floor. Their size made a single catch worth talking about in sagas. Several Norse tales mention heroes wrestling armored river dragons. Archaeological finds from Viking settlements include special sturgeon spears with detachable heads designed to pierce the fish's armor, showing how important these catches were to Viking fishermen. Besides their meat, sturgeons had other valuable uses. Their swim bladders were turned into isinglass, used to clarify beer and wine and to make strong glue. Their cartilage skeletons, when boiled, made a gelatin used in Viking medicine for joint problems. And most prized was sturgeon caviar, a delicacy for nobles and kings. By the late Viking Age, sturgeon numbers were already dropping in settled areas. They reproduced slowly, with females maturing at 15 to 20 years, making them easy to overfish. They were also easy targets during spawning runs and when basking near the surface. In the medieval period, dams blocked their spawning routes, and pollution made things worse. By the 18th century, Baltic sturgeon were so rare that Scandinavian monarchs claimed them as royal property, but it was too late. As Vikings moved inland, the armored giants of the rivers were replaced by the shaggy titans of the forest, the European bison, and its forest-dwelling cousin, the wisent. Unlike the American bison we know today, these European bison were adapted to the dense forests that once covered much of northern and eastern Europe. They could stand over 6 feet tall at the shoulder and weigh over 2,000 pounds, making them the heaviest land animal in Europe during the Viking Age. Bulls had massive shoulder humps covered with shaggy, dark brown fur, different from the lighter coat on their lower bodies. Their curved horns, though shorter than those of the aurochs, were just as dangerous when they charged. These woodland giants could move between trees with surprising ease, using their powerful bodies to make paths through the thickest undergrowth. These natural trails, used for generations, became known to Vikings as bison roads. They were reliable routes through otherwise impassable forests that human travelers could follow. For Viking communities moving into new areas, these massive herbivores were both an opportunity and a challenge. A successful bison hunt could feed a whole village for weeks, and their hides were thick enough to stop arrows, making them great for shields and winter clothing. The hump had concentrated fat reserves that made high-quality oil for lamps and waterproofing. But hunting these forest behemoths was very dangerous. Unlike deer or smaller game, wounded bison would often. There's something haunting about the thought of entire hunting parties being destroyed by enraged bulls. The power of those animals, charging through the woodland at 40 kilometers an hour, it's a force I can barely imagine. The European bison, you see, was a creature to be reckoned with, and by the late Viking Age, their numbers were already dwindling. Intensive hunting, coupled with the relentless clearing of forests for agriculture, pushed these magnificent animals into smaller and smaller areas. Unlike the aurochs, though, the European bison narrowly escaped complete extinction. A small population clung to life in the Białowieża forest between Poland and Belarus. And today, some 7,000 descendants still live there, the last direct link to the forest giants that the Vikings once hunted. It's a sobering thought, isn't it? The world the Vikings knew was vanishing even as they sailed, hunted, and settled. The very creatures that had defined their landscapes were fading into memory, pushed to extinction by the same human expansion and climate changes that fueled the Viking Age itself. Extinction didn't erase their terror. It sealed their legacy in blood and bone. For more than 600 million years, Earth served as a proving ground for predators, nature constantly the rules of survival. It's strange to think that the first paleontologists to unearth Smilodon remains didn't recognize them as belonging to a cat at all. Based on some isolated cheek teeth, they initially thought they'd found a new type of hyena. Imagine being an apex predator, ruling the wild at the top of the food chain. Life at the top has its perks, but even the most fearsome hunters aren't always the biggest beasts around. When it comes to the predator game, size isn't everything. Yet every so often, nature outdoes itself. It creates a carnivore so specialized, so perfectly adapted to hunting big game, that it seems almost like a creature of myth. These rare beasts develop weapons tailored specifically for tackling the giants of their time. Not too long ago, just a blink of an eye in Earth's timeline, one such feline prowled our planet. This wasn't just any big cat. This was the undisputed monarch of the Ice Age, Smilodon, the saber-toothed cat extraordinaire. With its iconic saber teeth and fierce appearance, Smilodon is one of the most instantly recognizable extinct predators, a status solidified by its portrayal in popular films. Rewind the clock about 160 years and picture yourself in Brazil. It's here that our tale begins with a discovery that would perplex the scientific community. When the first Smilodon remains were unearthed, paleontologists didn't immediately recognize them as belonging to a cat. In fact, their initial guess was way off the mark. Based on some isolated cheek teeth that bore an uncanny resemblance to those of modern hyenas, they dubbed this new find Hyena neogea. However, within a couple of years, the tides of discovery brought forth a tsunami of new fossils. Suddenly, scientists weren't just looking at a few teeth, but a veritable jigsaw puzzle of prehistoric proportions. Foot bones, skull fragments, and those iconic canines, which, by the way, seemed almost comically oversized for any mouth, painted a very different picture. As the pieces fell into place, it became clear that this was no hyena. Instead, they were dealing with a completely new genus of felid, one that was not only massive in size, but also built like a prehistoric tank. This feline was far more robust than any modern cat, a true heavyweight champion of the Ice Age. In light of this revelation, a new name was in order. Thus, Smilodon Populator was born. Smilodon, meaning knife-tooth, and Populator, roughly translating to the destroyer, or he who brings devastation. If you're thinking that sounds like the title of a heavy metal album, you're not wrong. And it's a fitting moniker for a predator that redefined what it meant to be lethal. With its new identity established, the scientific community dove headfirst into unraveling Smilodon's family tree. This quest for understanding continues to this day, with researchers currently placing our knife-toothed friend in the extinct subfamily Machairodontinae. This subfamily is home to most of what we colloquially call saber-toothed tigers, though saber-toothed cats is more accurate since these ancient felines aren't closely related to modern tigers or any living cats, for that matter. In fact, their closest living relatives might be members of the felinae subfamily, which includes our domestic kitties. Within the Machairodontinae, Smilodon found itself in an even more exclusive club, the Smilodontini, or as some paleontologists like to call them, the Dirk-Toothed cats. This group is pretty exclusive, with only 5 known genera calling it home. But what Smilodontini lacks in diversity, it makes up for in star power thanks to Smilodon. As research progressed, scientists discovered that Smilodon wasn't a lone standout. It was more like a prehistoric trio with 3 distinct members, each bringing something unique to the table: S. gracilis, S. fatalis, and S. populator. Now, if you found yourself face-to-face with any of these species, you probably wouldn't be too concerned with which one was about to turn you into lunch. But they did have their differences. First up, we have S. gracilis, the elder statesman of the group. This OG appeared in North America about 2.5 million years ago, descending from an even older genus called Meganterion. Next came S. fatalis, strutting onto the scene roughly 1 million years later. Last, but certainly not least, S. populator made its grand entrance about 600,000 years after Fatalis, fashionably late to the Ice Age party. S. gracilis, while no slouch in the size department, was the runt of the litter, tipping the scales at about the same weight as a modern jaguar. S. Fatalis, living up to its name, was a step up in the terror department, matching an African lion in size, but packing on extra muscle like a feline bodybuilder. We're talking about 280 kilos or 620 leb of prehistoric fury. That's on par with the largest tigers roaming the earth today, but S. Populator dominated them all. This behemoth pushed the boundaries of felid physiology, with the largest known specimens estimated to have weighed in at a jaw-dropping 470 kilos or 1040 lb. To put that in perspective, that's about the same as a medium-sized polar bear. Interestingly, unlike many modern big cats, Smilodons didn't seem to be too hung up on gender norms. Studies suggest that there wasn't a significant size difference between males and females, a trait scientists call low sexual dimorphism. In practical terms, this means that regardless of whether you were facing a male Smilodon or a female Smilodon, I sometimes imagine the sheer terror of facing a Smilodon. It wasn't just big, it was built like a prehistoric tank. Its heel bone, a marvel of natural engineering, was robust and elongated. Some paleontologists even speculate that these Ice Age cats could have outleapt modern lions. Imagine a cat the size of a bear capable of leaping over a one-story building, but its athletic prowess didn't stop at fancy footwork. If modern big cats have arms that could crush you, Smilodon's forelimbs were next level. They were about 20% thicker than you'd expect for a cat of its size, giving it incredible strength, surpassing even the larger American lion. And at the end of those muscular arms, it was armed with fully retractable claws, razor-sharp and curved like prehistoric scimitars. These weren't just weapons. They were nature's equivalent of grappling hooks, perfect for latching onto large prey. But let's be real. When we think of Smilodon, it's not its impressive vertical leap or powerful forearms that come to mind. It's all about those teeth, those iconic, impossibly long canines that have captured imaginations for generations. Now, saber teeth aren't unique to Smilodon. Nature has played around with this dental design in various mammals and even some non-mammals throughout history. But Smilodon perfected it, taking the concept to an entirely new level. What made its fangs special wasn't just their presence, but their sheer audacious length. We're talking about canines so long they protruded well beyond the lower jaw, a feature that was uncommon even among other saber-toothed cats. To put it in perspective, Smilodon's canines could grow up to 8 inches or 20 centimeters long. That's longer than many modern kitchen knives. They were precision instruments of prehistoric destruction, shaped like deadly daggers, with sharp points and smooth, narrow sides designed to pierce deep into flesh with devastating efficiency. Here's where things get really interesting. You'd expect a predator with teeth like that to have a powerful bite to match. But surprisingly, studies have shown that Smilodon's bite was relatively weak, only about 1,000 newtons, which is 4 times weaker than a modern lion's. So, how did it kill? Well, that's been a subject of much debate among paleontologists. One popular theory suggests that Smilodon was the original ambush predator. Picture this: a Smilodon hidden in dense vegetation, waiting for the perfect moment. Then, with a powerful leap, it pounces on its unsuspecting prey. Using those muscular forelimbs and grappling hook claws, it pins down its victim. With precision, it sinks its saber teeth into the prey's soft underbelly, causing massive internal damage and blood loss. But not everyone buys this gut-stabbing hypothesis. Many researchers favor a different but equally grim scenario. They propose that Smilodon used its powerful build to quickly overpower its prey, then delivered a precise, lethal bite to the throat. This would have caused severe blood loss and suffocation, a quick, if not particularly pleasant end for its unfortunate victims. Adding fuel to this theory is the discovery that Smilodon could open its jaw to an incredible 120 degrees. That's almost twice as wide as a human can manage. With a gape like that, pretty much every neck in the Ice Age would have been fair game. But Smilodon wasn't just brawn and teeth. Brain scans of Smilodon skulls suggest that these prehistoric predators had excellent coordination, sharp hearing, and top-notch vision. Their eye socket shape hints at binocular vision, giving them the depth perception needed to judge distances accurately, crucial for a predator that relied on ambush tactics. And if all that wasn't enough, they were fast too. Many Smilodon fossils show trauma to their sternums, the kind of injury you'd expect from high-speed collisions. This suggests that not only were they quick on their feet, but they were also willing to risk life and limb, or at least a bruised chest, in pursuit of their next meal. Smilodon's unique traits, along with its powerful weaponry, made it a versatile hunter capable of taking down a wide variety of megafaunal prey. The specific animals it targeted varied based on the region it called home. In North America, their prey included oversized versions of animals we recognize today, giant bison, camels, and if the opportunity arose, even mastodons and Columbian mammoths. Yes, these cats were taking down creatures that dwarfed modern elephants. In South America, Smilodon's targets were equally impressive and diverse, including creatures like Toxodon, Litopterna, various species of Glyptodon, along with more familiar animals such as horses and camelids. Some evidence even suggests that Smilodon occasionally went after caimans, cementing its status as a top predator. We know what Smilodon ate thanks to skeletal evidence such as tooth marks on bones, or Smilodon remains found alongside those of their prey, providing vital clues about its diet. One big question that's still hotly debated in paleontology circles is whether Smilodon was a lone hunter or a team player. This isn't just academic curiosity. Knowing whether Smilodon hunted in packs could tell us a lot about its social structure and what kind of prey it typically targeted. One of the strongest pieces of evidence supporting the idea that Smilodons lived socially comes from the La Brea tar pits in California. These California tar pits are a gold mine for paleontologists, preserving countless Ice Age animals that got stuck in the sticky asphalt. The La Brea tar pits in Los Angeles. I've always found them a haunting place, a graveyard of the Ice Age. But within that grim scene, there's a compelling story about the saber-toothed cat, Smilodon. The tar pits acted as deadly traps, not just for herbivores, but also for predators who got stuck trying to feast on them. Smilodon fossils are the second most common find in these pits. Over 166,000 bones have been attributed to it. This staggering number has led some scientists to wonder if Smilodon might have actually been a social animal. The idea is that, like modern social cat species, they might have been responsive to distress calls. So, if one Smilodon got stuck, it could have called for help. inadvertently luring other members of its group into the sticky trap. It's a dark image, but it could explain why we find so many remains in one place. Another fascinating clue that hints at Smilodon's possible social behavior is surprisingly rather touching. Some Smilodon fossils show evidence of severe injuries or disabilities that would have made hunting nearly impossible. Yet, these individuals survived well into adulthood. This has led some paleontologists to propose what they call pseudo-health care among them. The theory suggests that these injured cats were cared for by their fellow Smilodons, much like modern lions or wolves might support injured members of their pride or pack. I remember reading about one famous example, a Smilodon fossil showing signs of hip dysplasia from a young age, yet it somehow managed to survive to adulthood. It's hard to imagine how such an animal could have hunted successfully on its own. It paints a heartwarming, if speculative, picture of Smilodon families looking after their own. Of course, not everyone is convinced by this Smilodon social club theory. Some researchers point out that Smilodon remains found outside of predator traps, like La Brea, tend to be more isolated. They argue that this points to a more solitary lifestyle, more in line with many modern big cats. Regardless of whether Smilodon was a team player or a loner, one thing's for it was at the top of the food chain, but that doesn't mean it didn't have competition. The Ice Age was a time of giants, and Smilodon wasn't the only predator with an appetite for mammoth-sized meals. Two of Smilodon's biggest rivals were the American lion and the dire wolf. Now, while real dire wolves were impressive, they weren't quite as monstrous as their fictional counterparts. But they were formidable predators nonetheless. Isotope analysis reveals that they had a diet very similar to Smilodon. In other words, these predators were often competing for the same prey. So, how did Smilodon meet up against its competitors? Well, when it came to the American lion, it was probably a bit of a standoff. The American lion had size on its side, being one of the largest cats to ever exist. But Smilodon had those impressive canines, which likely served as a pretty effective deterrent. Most likely, these two apex predators tried to avoid each other when possible. But when conflicts did occur, it could have gone either way. The dire wolf, on the other hand, seems to have often come out second best in confrontations with Smilodon. Evidence from La Brea suggests that dire wolves would frequently abandon their kills when a Smilodon showed up. I can imagine why, given those sabers being on full display at all times. But lions and wolves weren't the only competition Smilodon had to worry about. The Ice Age was also the time of the short-faced bear, a beast that could make even Smilodon look small by comparison. Some of these bears reached truly dinosaurian proportions. However, these ursine giants were more omnivorous than Smilodon, which likely reduced direct competition. Plus, bears tend to be solitary creatures. So, if a group of Smilodons encountered one, the bear would likely have decided that this particular picnic basket wasn't worth the trouble. We've talked a lot about Smilodon's impressive hunting adaptations, but there's one question we haven't addressed yet. How on earth did it eat with those ridiculous teeth? After all, those saber-like fangs seem like they would have been quite the obstacle during feeding. Well, Smilodon had a solution for that, too. Unlike most predators that can chomp down from the front, Smilodon was equipped with specialized slicing teeth called carnassials. These teeth, situated on the sides of the mouth, worked like biological scissors, shearing through meat with ease. To eat, Smilodon would have turned its head to the side, using these carnassials to slice off manageable chunks of meat while its saber teeth stayed out of the way. If this eating style sounds familiar, that's because you might have seen it in action. Many modern cats and even other predators use a similar technique when tackling tough pieces of meat. It's a prime example of nature's problem solving. When life gives you saber teeth, you adapt your eating style accordingly. With its unique adaptations and hunting prowess, Smilodon carved out a vast empire for itself. Between its three species, it achieved a distribution across the Western Hemisphere that would make any modern predator green with envy. In North America, S. Gracilis and S. Fatalis roamed from coast to coast, reaching as far north as Alberta, Canada. Meanwhile, in South America, S. Fatalis and S. Populator established a domain stretching all the way down to Patagonia. But Smilodon wasn't just geographically widespread, it was also adaptable. Fossils have been found in a diverse array of environments, from grasslands and plains to woodlands and closed forests, from savannas to subtropical forests, and even mammoth steppes. This adaptability allowed Smilodon to live alongside a veritable who's who of Pleistocene megafauna. We're talking about a world where you might encounter short-faced bears, proboscideans, ground sloths the size of cars, armored glyptodonts, the rhino-like toxodon, camels, deer, horses, bison, and even terror birds. It's easy to think of the Ice Age as a real-life video game level, but with one crucial difference: saber-toothed cats. And in those twilight years, Smilodon encountered a species that would forever change the planet: humans. I can only imagine what it must have been like to be one of our early ancestors, armed with nothing but primitive tools, suddenly face to face with a saber-toothed cat. The relationship, I suspect, was tense. We were, after all, competing for the same food, and by the time we arrived, only the larger Smilodon Populator and Smilodon Fatalis remained. Bad timing indeed. Given that Meganterion, a possible predecessor to Smilodon, occasionally preyed on Homo erectus, it's not hard to imagine that Smilodon might have considered early humans as potential prey too. But humans are nothing if not resourceful. While we don't have direct evidence of human-Smilodon confrontations, our superior technology and group tactics likely allowed us to turn the tables from time to time. In 2021, something truly extraordinary was discovered: a petroglyph that seems to depict a group of humans observing a Smilodon from afar. It's a tantalizing glimpse into a world where our ancestors shared the landscape with magnificent and terrifying creatures. But as we know, this coexistence didn't last. Somewhere between then and now, Smilodon disappeared. The youngest remains of both S. fatalis and S. populator date back roughly 10,000 years. Around the same time, humans were discovering agriculture. The extinction of Smilodon is still debated among paleontologists. Some argue that humans played a role, either through direct competition or by altering habitats through fire. Others are less convinced. The more widely accepted theory points to the broader quaternary extinction event as the primary cause. This period of significant climate change saw the disappearance of many large animal species in North and South America. As the megafauna that Smilodon relied on for food began to die out, the saber-toothed predator found itself in an increasingly precarious position. In a cruel twist, the very adaptations that made Smilodon a successful hunter of large prey became a liability. Specialized to take down giants, it struggled to adapt to a world where those giants were disappearing. It was, in essence, too good at what it did. When the world changed, it couldn't change with it. The extinction of Smilodon marked not just the end of a species, but the end of an era. It was the last of the saber-toothed cats, not just in the Americas, but worldwide. With its passing, a lineage that had dominated the planet for over 20 million years came to an end. Its legacy, however, still resonates in museum exhibits, in our imaginations, and as a reminder of the fragile balance between species and their environments. As we face our own period of rapid change, the lesson of Smilodon is clear. Survival requires adaptation. Mammoths were icons of the Ice Age, towering giants weighing tons. But they weren't the scariest things out there, not even close. Lurking in the same frozen wastelands was a creature that made mammoths look quaint. A beast so massive, so brutally engineered, it was less an animal and more a biological battering ram. Imagine the size of a mammoth, but fused with the destructive force of a medieval war machine. This was no gentle giant. It didn't need curved tusks or a coat to command respect. All it had, all it needed, was a single monstrous weapon, one so lethal, so precise, that every encounter became a high-stakes gamble with survival. This was the true juggernaut of the Ice Age, Elasmotherium sibiricum. Imagine a rhinoceros that decided regular size wasn't intimidating enough. Now multiply that by roughly 3. Add the bulk of a small elephant and crown it with a single horn so massive it could serve as a battering ram for medieval warfare. What you're picturing is still probably smaller than the reality of Elasmotherium. This wasn't just large, it was monumentally, almost absurdly oversized. Standing 6.5 feet at the shoulder and stretching 15 feet from nose to tail, Elasmotherium weighed in at a staggering 5 tons of pure, horn-equipped muscle. But the mements alone don't capture the true horror of encountering this beast. The defining feature, the element that transformed Elasmotherium from merely large to genuinely nightmarish, was the horn. Not horns, plural, like its modern rhinoceros descendants, but a single massive horn that could reach lengths of up to 6 feet. Six feet of solid, pointed bone jutting from the center of its forehead like some prehistoric unicorn's fever dream. And unlike the mammoth's curved tusks, which were primarily tools for foraging and occasional defense, Elasmotherium's horn was purpose-built for devastation. It was perfectly positioned for charging attacks, designed to concentrate the full force of 5 tons of angry herbivore into a single armor-piercing point. Any creature unfortunate enough to find itself on the receiving end of an Elasmotherium charge wasn't just facing injury, it was facing obliteration. But the horn was just the beginning. Strip away that intimidating weapon, and you're still left with a creature that redefined what it meant to be perfectly adapted for the Ice Age. I've always been fascinated by creatures that defy expectations, those that carve their own path in the face of adversity. The woolly mammoth, for instance, always seemed like an oversized elephant struggling against the ice. But the Elasmotherium, it was something else entirely. It was purpose-built for the frozen world. Start with the legs, where things get truly impressive. Unlike the mammoth's thick, pillar-like limbs, better suited for slow movement, the Elasmotherium possessed legs that were both powerful and surprisingly agile. These weren't just weight-bearing supports. They were the foundation of a charging mechanism that could accelerate 5 tons of muscle and bone into a thundering full-speed charge, flattening anything in its path. Mammoths carried their weight evenly, but the Elasmotherium, its mass was front-loaded, designed to turn every charge into a catastrophic collision. This wasn't accidental. It was millions of years of brutal efficiency honed into one purpose: impact. The shoulder muscles alone were powerful enough to absorb the shock of high-speed collisions, something that would have shattered the bones of lesser creatures. But perhaps most critically, the Elasmotherium had solved the fundamental problem that plagued many Ice Age giants: energy efficiency. While mammoths required vast quantities of vegetation to fuel their massive bodies, the Elasmotherium's digestive system was optimized for extracting maximum nutrition from the sparse grasses and tough vegetation that dominated the frozen steppes. This wasn't just survival. It was thriving in conditions that left other megafauna struggling. Its skull, built like a natural helmet, could withstand impacts that would have been fatal to creatures with more delicate cranial architecture. This wasn't just about protection. It was about turning the entire head into a weapon system. When the Elasmotherium charged, it wasn't just the horn that posed a threat. It was the entire front end of the creature functioning as an organic siege engine. Compare this to the mammoth's approach to survival, which largely relied on group protection and intimidation through size. Elasmotherium needed no such social strategies. It was a solitary predator's nightmare and a territorial competitor's worst enemy, capable of defending resources and territory through sheer individual dominance. While mammoths huddled together for warmth and protection, Elasmotherium stood alone because nothing else on the frozen landscape posed a credible threat. And then there was the horn, that magnificent, terrifying horn, up to 6 feet in length and potentially weighing as much as 100 pounds. This wasn't some decorative display piece. This was a weapon that could punch through ice, tree trunks, and presumably any creature unfortunate enough to challenge its owner. To put this in perspective, that's a horn longer than a standard parking space is wide, attached to a creature that could wield it with the precision of a medieval knight and the force of a freight train. The positioning was crucial. Unlike modern rhinoceroses, which carry their horns on their snouts, Elasmotherium's horn was mounted directly on the forehead, the optimal position for delivering devastating charging attacks. This placement meant that when the creature lowered its head to charge, the horn became the leading edge of a 5-ton projectile moving at 25 km. The physics alone are genuinely frightening. But here's where it gets even more interesting. The horn wasn't just a weapon. Analysis of its structure suggests it served multiple functions that gave Elasmotherium distinct advantages over its contemporaries. The base was broad and sturdy, enough to serve as a snowplow, allowing the creature to clear feeding areas that would have been inaccessible to other herbivores. In a world where food was scarce and competition was fierce, this ability to access buried vegetation was literally a matter of life and death. The horned surface was likely covered in keratin, the same material that makes up our fingernails, but structured for maximum durability. This covering would have been constantly growing and self-sharpening, ensuring that the weapon remained effective throughout the creature's lifetime. Unlike antlers that shed annually, this horn was a permanent, ever-improving tool of destruction. Recent fossil evidence suggests the horn may have been even more formidable than previously imagined. Some specimens show evidence of horn bases that could have supported structures up to 8 feet long. Weapons that would have made the creature's intimidation factor approach the genuinely absurd. An 8-foot horn on a 5-ton creature represents a level of natural weaponry that has no modern equivalent. Imagine being a saber-toothed cat or cave bear, creatures that were accustomed to being the apex predators of their respective environments, suddenly encountering something that could quite literally impale you from 8 feet away. The horn didn't just change how Elasmotherium fought, it changed how everything else on the Ice Age landscape had to live, constantly aware that somewhere in the frozen wilderness there was a creature carrying a weapon that could end any confrontation before it truly began.